Sangye Cherdang Soki Chokdam La Japcho Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyengi Pesonam Ki Rola Penche Sangye Dupa Shok Sangye Cherdang Soki Chokdam La Japcho Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyengi Pesonam Ki Drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye cherdang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chenyen gi pesonam gi drola penche sangye drupa shok.
So just close your eyes and focus on your mind. You can feel the positive energy of the prayers reverberating in it. So now let's try and get centered by focusing on our breath. Just focus on the breath where it goes out and comes in through your nostrils. Keep your mind there for a couple of minutes without allowing yourself to become distracted by anything whatsoever. So now look into your mind and check your motivation for being at this session this morning. So if you find your motivation is just a temporal motivation, just concern for obtaining some kind of benefit, happiness, comfort of this life alone, then recognize that as coming from attachment. That's a negative motivation. the result of which will be suffering. So determine not to follow that motivation, but replace it by positive motivation. You think the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, I have to reach enlightenment myself. That depends upon studying, practicing, meditating on realizing the entire path to enlightenment. Therefore, I'm going to study teachings on the path to enlightenment in order to become a Buddha and enlighten all sentient beings. So, try to feel that motivation, which is rooted in compassion for all sentient beings, rather than just thinking it intellectually. Okay, thank you. So we had a little bit of easy homework last time, just had to memorize and think about the 10 non-virtuous actions. So hopefully you did something like that. So when, those negative actions, we have to avoid doing them, obviously. But also we've been doing them since beginning this time. So we have a lot of imprints of those 10 non-virtuous actions in our mind. And so when we do like Vajrasattva retreat, so I think I mentioned last time, one of the first practices Lama Yeshe gave us was Vajrasattva practice. And in the early and the first long retreat many of us did back in the early 70s was the 3-month Vajrasattva retreat, where you recite 100,000 of the long Vajrasattva mantra, and the visualization with the rest. So there's the sadhana that you go through the preliminary practices, and then you get to the visualization, and you get to the mantra recitation, and then you have to recite all these 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras. Actually, usually we do 108 or 110,000 just to make up for any that you do a few extra to make up for some that might not have been done properly. In my case, though, none of them were done properly. So I should still be in retreat like 50 years later, but circumstances didn't allow that. So when you're doing the reciting the mantra, you're visualizing purification. Everyone knows the 3 ways of purifying, flushing negativities out through lower orifices, and then filling up like a vase filling with water, and the negativities floating up on top and then coming out your ears and nose and mouth and upper openings. And then the instantaneous purification, where the light and nectar comes in from Vajrasattva, and the darkness of ignorance and negativities are instantly dispelled, like darkness in a room disappears when you turn on the light. So when you're doing those different visualizations, that you can visualize certain negativities being flushed out. So in one session, you could focus on purifying 10 non-virtuous actions, or even one of the 10, because you're doing 4 sessions a day, and the mantra recitation lasts probably for an hour in a 2-hour session. So you can spend the whole hour of one session flushing out all the killing, the first non-virtuous action that you've done. And then the next session, you could focus on purifying and then think of all the instances of killing that you've done, of probably not humans, but all animals and insects and fish and so forth. So you can bring to mind, and as you're doing the mantra recitation, which of the 4 opponent powers that the practice entails, you feel, the recitation is the power of the remedy, and then you feel regret as you bring to mind those various instances of killing that you've done, and realize that they've left imprints on your mind, so you flush that out and feel it's been completely purified. So like that, so you can go through each of the 10 non-virtuous actions, and then you might, in another session, you might purify, or next few sessions, purify negative actions done with holy objects, like with the guru, getting angry at the guru, or not having not followed his advice, or having criticized. There are different negative actions, having harmed guru's body. I mean, there are different things we might have done since beginningless time when we've had a teacher, when we've had a guru. So those are very heavy negative karmas. So again, you try to think of any instances of this life where you've created negative actions with your guru, and then think of all different kind of possible actions you could do or you could have done in beginningless previous lives, and realize you probably have done them, or certainly have done them. So purify those and visualize, flushing those out in different ways. And then, at the end of the session, the end of the recitation, feel, now I've purified all those negative karmas completely. So then you feel you're very, your body very clean and full of light and sort of transparent. And then you might think of negative actions you've done against Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, like, handling Buddha statues in the wrong way, stepping on them, or treating them like material objects rather than body of the actual Buddha. Dharma, not treating Dharma books with respect, putting them on the floor, stepping over them, treating them carelessly, treating them like ordinary material, like other books, ordinary samsaric books. So all this stuff comes in the teachings on refuge in detail. So you're probably pretty familiar with that. Negativity created with a Sangha, disrespecting the Sangha, criticizing them, maybe speaking badly of a monk or nun to other monks or nuns, so causing kind of a disharmony in the Sangha community, things like that. So think of what you might have done in this life, and then know that whatever negativity you is possible to create with Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Since beginning of time, created all those. So again, purify all that. So anyway, and then other negativities created with sentient beings that maybe not covered by the 10 non-virtuous actions. The 10 is just a summary. There are countless negative actions we can do. So anyways, doing that for 3 months, so going through the cycle of different kinds of negativities over and over again is extremely powerful purification. So if you haven't done a 3-month Vajrasattva retreat, it's something to aspire to. And in our organization, they have them. I think there's one at Kopan in Nepal going on right now. They also do it at Tushita Retreat Center in Dharamsala. And Milarepa Center used to do them over the winter, but I'm not sure they do anymore. I mean, they did. Lama Yeshe used to recommend, if you haven't done a retreat before, to do a group retreat, because the group energy sort of keeps you, makes it harder to skip sessions and stuff like that. But you can also, if you feel up to it, you can do an individual retreat. The ones that I just mentioned in Nepal and India are group retreats. Milarepa Center, people used to do, they just have, 2 or 3 people doing individual retreats through the winter. I'm talking back, in the 80s and 90s. And so, when you bring to mind all these different kinds of negative actions and purify them, then at the end, when you feel like I've completely purified that, then, you make a determination not to do it again. And Rinpoche would say, if you feel you can make the determination not to do it again for the rest of your life, then do that. If you feel that's too much, you can say, well, I won't do it again this year, or I won't do it again today, or I won't do it again in the next 5 minutes. I mean, something. And so maybe you can, as you get more confidence that you've got a handle on this negativity or that, then you can extend the period that you make a determination or vow not to do it again. Anyway, for us, sort of beginners, then purification is very important. Okay, so before I get to the book, has anyone got any questions about anything? Anything at all? Investment opportunities? No? Everybody's clear on everything? Okay.
Nick, I have a question.
Okay.
It's not about what you just spoke about. It was from the first class. We talked about the 8 freedoms.
Yeah.
So I'm not clear.
8 free. Yeah. 8 freedoms, right? Yep.
Not being born as an animal. Yeah. So on the I'm not quite clear about the difference between one being born in a border region or a remote place versus, and the other one place a dark age where no Buddha has come. What's the difference between those two?
So when you go through the freedoms, the first four are non-human states, so we're free from those. But even though I was born human, I was born at a time when the Buddha had not, I think the word in the thing is Buddha had descended, or Buddha had not manifested on earth. And so there was no Dharma teaching. So remember we talked about this, the four great eons, the eon of evolution, the great eon of relative stability, which we're sort of in now, the great eon of destruction, and the great eon of emptiness, the four cycles of a world system. And within the great eon of relative stability or existence, even there are these 20 lesser eons of where the human manifest, and because of great positive karma, their lives are very long and blissful, and their bodies are made of light. They're humans, they're not gods, but they live for like 10,000 years. Then gradually because the seeds of delusion are still in their mind, then gradually attachment and aversion and different negative minds arise. And the lifespan, because the negative karma is increasing, lifespan gets shorter and shorter. So as it's on the way down to around 100 years or 100 to 100 years, sort of like it is now, then the karma is ripe for the human beings to be open to Dharma teaching. So that's when Guru Shakyamuni Buddha appeared, and then that'll get worse and worse, and then the Dharma will disappear, and the earth will get more and more violent. The lifespan will get shorter and shorter. They say it gets down to about 10 years, and the whole place is extremely horrible and violent. And then gradually, as that negative karma is expended, then slowly the positive karma gets, the seeds of previously created positive karma gets stronger. So the lifespan starts to go up and up and up again to 10,000 years. But on the way up, the karma isn't such that the humans are receptive to the Dharma, so the Buddha doesn't appear then. So it's only all the way up, and then on the next cycle down, the next Buddha, like Maitreya Buddha, will appear. So this I've seen that within a great eon within each of these great eons, there are 20 lesser eons. But this is also called the fortunate eons, when 1,000 Buddhas will appear. So I haven't quite put the 20 and the 1,000 together, how that works. But Guru Shakyamuni Buddha was the fourth of the 1,000 Buddhas, and Maitreya will be the fifth. So only in that vast period of time, in the lesser eon, when there's this window when like now, the Dharma will last about 5,000 years. And so the other billions of years is called a dark period. So if you're born human during then, you don't have that fifth freedom. You're not born at a time when the Dharma teachings exist. So that's time. But so even in this 5,000 years when the Dharma exists, there are a lot of places on earth where the Dharma exists in some places, but not in others. Mm-hmm. So this what that teaching is talking about is at that time, around when the Buddha taught, you really had to be around in India and around northern India, basically, to get the teachings. And then gradually, as the Dharma spread, the sort of border areas where there wasn't Dharma sort of got further and further away. But if at that time you were born, in America or Australia or England, Europe, that was kind of a border area. The Dharma hadn't reached there, so you didn't have the sixth freedom of being born where the Dharma exists. You see the difference? One is to do with time, the other is to do with place. So, and the place sort of moves around a bit. I mean, the Dharma exists in Tibet, but nothing like it did. And Rinpoche said that really the definition of the existence of the Dharma is where what I referred to in the second richness, being born in this in a central, well, literally I think it says a center of a religious country, or in a central country which is where the lineage of the ordinations exists. So where you can get the 5 precepts, where there's unbroken transmission of the lineage of the precepts from the Buddha himself. So where the lineage of the 5 precepts, the lineage of the novice ordination, the lineage of the full ordinations, all these different ordinations exist. You can even say the Bodhisattva ordination lineage and the lineage of the tantric vows. In the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, he just talks about 3 vows. How does the verse go anyway? Something 3 vows. I forget the exact verse. It doesn't mean like 3 vows like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. It means the 3 levels of vows: the pratimoksha vows, the vows of individual liberation, the bodhisattva vows, and the tantric vows. Those are the 3 vows that verse is referring to. That translation, so had to be abbreviated to make it chantable. That was David Malk's translation. The Geshe Tsulga's first translator, when Geshe was putting together this Kurukulla lineage of prayers. David was his first translator, and he fancied himself as a bit of a poet, so he translated them in a chantable into English in a chantable way. So it was abbreviated to 3 vows. But what it means is the 3 kinds of vows: the pratimoksha, individual liberation vows, like the 5 lay vows or the 8 Mahayana precepts we take for 24 hours, or the monks and nuns vows, the novice and the fully ordained vows. So the pratimoksha vows of individual liberation, and then the bodhisattva vows for the Mahayana practitioners, and the tantric vows for those practicing the Vajrayana. So the lineage, I think strictly speaking, it probably refers to the pratimoksha vows. That is a religious country, that is a central country, so-called. So that's where you have to be to have the 6th freedom. Is that clear?
Yes, it's clearer than most of the commentaries I read.
Oh, you should have written it down. Publish it. If you look at the 10 richnesses, I think the 6th one is it? What's the 6th one? Being born when the Buddha has descended. And the 7th one is the Buddha having turned the wheel of Dharma, or having taught. Is that right? Somebody look it up.
Yes, that's correct.
I didn't do my homework. Okay, so there's a difference there. Do you know what the difference is?
Well, the Buddha doesn't teach when Adam was born. He wasn't, recognized as the Buddha until he left the palace and, attained enlightenment.
Right. So there's a story that when he was born, there was a sage passing by the palace, something like that, and the king asked the sage to come in and see the newborn child and make a prediction. And so the old guy started crying, got very upset. And so the king was very worried. What's his name? King Shuddhadana was the Buddha's father, Prince Siddhartha's father. And he said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And the sage said, "Oh no, your son is going to be a great teacher." And the father said, "So why are you crying?" He said, "Because he won't start teaching until after I've died, so I won't be able to benefit from his teachings." So it's like you said, the Buddha descended, the Buddha was born, but he didn't start teaching until he was like 35 or something. He left the palace when he was 29 and then wandered around doing different things for 6 years, and then finally attained enlightenment, and then didn't teach for 7 weeks, and then he met these 5 disciples that he'd known before, and they asked him to teach. And then in Sarnath, he did the first turning of the wheel, taught the 4 Noble Truths. So it's a bit of a hollow richness, the 6th one, being born at a time when the Buddha has descended, but he hasn't taught yet. But the 7th one is, he's taught. So we're lucky because we've been born after the Buddha taught. And then the 8th one is that the existence of the teachings, the 2 kinds of teachings. So the 2 kinds of teachings are the words, teaching of words, and the teachings or the realizations. So the existence of, so the Buddha's teachings exist in books, in the words exist, but also there are teachers who have realized the teachings, who have realizations, who are enlightened, so that's so to receive the teachings from a teacher who's realized the teachings is a huge blessing, rather than just from someone like me who doesn't have any realization, but can sort of has heard a few teachings and can sort of repeat them like a tape recorder without really understanding. So there's a big difference there. So that's the 8th richness, the existence of not just the words, but also the realizations, so that there's a chance to receive realized teachings from someone who's had the direct experience. So, when we talk about the teachings on the path to enlightenment, the graduated path, the Lam Rim, stages of the path, and you look at the outline, and there's all these, hundreds and thousands of steps, even within each. So there's a teaching on perfect human rebirth, but then there's the 8 freedoms and the 10 richnesses and the 3 ways in which it's useful, and then the different ways how it's difficult to receive, and all these subsections. Each one is a topic to understand intellectually, to meditate on, and to realize. So the goal is to first there are these 3 levels of wisdom that we aim to develop. So the first is they're called the wisdom of hearing. So you hear about a teaching, or you read a teaching for the first time, and you maybe you don't understand it right away, but you read it, and then you gain the knowledge, the intellectual knowledge of that particular topic, like the 8 freedoms or 10 richnesses. So then there might be some doubt. Well, is that really true or not? So then the second level is where we do what we call analytical meditation. So the two kinds of meditation, there's analytical meditation and single-pointed concentration, or stabilizing meditation, or placement meditation. The different terms are used, where you focus single-pointedly on topic. So the first level of wisdom is the wisdom of hearing, or just learning about a particular aspect of the teaching. And then the second is thinking about it, doing analytical meditation to prove it true or false for your own mind. So like the Buddha said, everything I teach is true, but don't believe it just because I said so. You have to prove it true for yourself by analyzing it and coming to a conclusion. So that's the important part of analytical meditation, is coming to a conclusion, like past and future lives. For most of us, when we meet the Dharma, we didn't really believe or even know about reincarnation, that the mind is beginningless and endless. So for a lot of us, our natural reaction is, oh, that can't be true. I never heard that before. My parents didn't teach me that. I didn't learn that at school. I didn't learn that at university. It didn't come up when I was doing my PhD. Nobody I know believes that. Can't be true. So you have to think about it and see if it's true or not. So we do analytical meditation to come to a conclusion. So there are two kinds of beings that have a mind. There are enlightened beings, Buddhas, and sentient beings. So the difference is ignorance. Buddhas were once sentient beings, but they completely purified their minds of gross and subtle delusions, and having done that, became enlightened. So Buddhas weren't always Buddhas. They were once sentient beings who practiced Dharma. And so the gross delusions are, the ignorance, attachment, aversion, and, there are, 6 principal delusions and 51 secondary minds. There are 20 secondary delusions out of the 51. Anyway, there are six principal consciousness and 51 secondary minds. And amongst the 51 secondary minds are 6 principal delusions and 20 secondary delusions. So those are what we call the gross delusions. So those are the minds that keep us in cyclic existence. So 2 kinds of beings of mind, the Buddhas and sentient beings, and the Buddhas, those who freed their minds from gross and subtle delusions. Within sentient beings, there are also 2 kinds of sentient beings. There are those who are in cyclic existence. They're in the 6 realms or in the intermediate state. And there are those who are liberated, or arhats, or free, who have attained liberation from cyclic existence. And the difference is that the sentient beings within cyclic existence are still under the influence of the gross delusions, and the sentient beings who are free from cyclic existence, who attain liberation, the arhats, they have freed themselves from gross delusions, but not the subtle delusions. So the gross delusions, as we operate under their influence, they leave imprints on our consciousness. So even though we're free, we can free ourselves from gross delusions by following 3 higher trainings in conduct, concentration, wisdom. Still, the imprints are there. Remember the analogy sometimes given of if you burn onions in a pot. So when you burn onions in a pot, it leaves a kind of a black sticky mess that kind of smells bad, unless you like the smell of burnt onions. So then, but if you want to use the pot for something else, then you've got to clean out the burnt onions. So you scrub it clean and do all that. But even after it's all clean and shiny, you can still smell the smell of the burnt onions remains. So so that's the analogy, that you can get rid of the gross delusions, but you can still kind of you're still under the influence of the imprints. So to go from liberation to enlightenment, you have to get rid of the imprints of the delusions as well. And when we act under the influence of the delusions, we create these imprints that we leave our karma. So then they, positive karmas ripen into happiness, negative karmas ripen into suffering. So, the mind is, the mind or consciousness, the synonyms, the stream of consciousness is formless. It has no shape or color. So when you say what is the mind or what is the consciousness, we say it's a formless entity that has the ability to perceive objects. So it has these 2 qualities of formlessness and cognition. So this formless mind is impermanent. That is, it's changing from moment to moment. And the fact that it's impermanent indicates that it is the product of causes. Something that's a causative phenomenon is, but axiomatically, is impermanent. So most phenomena that exist. So, one of the things that not sure what the word is, impressed me about the teachings in my first course, or got my attention, is that Buddhism explains everything that exists. Everything. And there's a classification for everything, and phenomena are classified into existent and non-existent. So the non-existent, don't worry about that much because they don't exist. The existent phenomena divided into permanent and impermanent. So most phenomena are impermanent. Permanent phenomena are like space, empty space. It has no cause. It's just there, everywhere. And other permanent phenomena are like the ultimate nature of things, like the ultimate nature of this rosary. As long as the rosary exists, its ultimate nature, its emptiness exists, and that doesn't change. But when the rosary ceases to exist, its emptiness no longer exists. But while it's there, it doesn't change, the emptiness. So in that sense, it's a permanent phenomenon. even though it doesn't last forever. So, you know, gross and subtle impermanence. Gross impermanence is like the body. It's approaching its demise all the time, and eventually it ceases to exist. So that's the gross impermanence, is something, or a building, you know, it was there and then it's demolished and it no longer exists. But during its existence, there's subtle impermanence in that in the tiniest fraction of a second, it's constantly changing. So the fact that the mind is impermanent, is changing from moment to moment. It's like we talk about a stream of consciousness because it's constantly running. So that shows that it's the product of causes. So causes are principal and secondary, like the principal cause of an apple tree is the apple seed. You know, not a flower seed or not an orange seed, an apple seed. And that's the principal cause. And then the secondary causes are that cause it to sprout, you know, the dirt and the sunshine and water and minerals, whatever, you know, fertilizer, whatever it takes to germinate the seed. So the result of the cause has to be similar in nature to its principal cause. So the principal cause of the formless mind, which has the ability to perceive objects, has to be a formless cause that has the ability to perceive objects. It can't be a physical cause, you know, such as the brain. So, you know, most scientists and everybody, you know, will tell you that the mind is a product of brain activity. So the brain may be sort of a contributing factor, but the principal cause of the mind has to be formless, a formless entity that has ability to perceive objects. In other words, it has to be a previous state of mind. So, and that's what the mind is. It's just a series of thought moments, each one coming after the previous one. So if you follow that logic, you can see there can't be a first moment of mind. So if you're trying to do analytical meditation on, you know, on reincarnation, on, you know, if the mind is beginningless or not, then that's kind of one way to think about it. So if you do think about it that way, you can see that the mind has to come from its own previous continuity, not from, you know, some kind of cosmic consciousness or from the minds of your parents, because your mind is your own individual mind. Anyway, so that's the second level. The second wisdom we have to develop is the wisdom of contemplation, where you come to a conclusion, and the conclusion may be different from what you've always thought. So in that case, if you may come to the conclusion, oh, that's true. The mind really is beginningless. And also, the mind is endless. You know, what's the mass energy thing? The mass and energy are interchangeable, but they never goes out of existence. Something like that. Anyway, the mind never goes out of existence. Only its state changes from, you know, ignorant to enlightened eventually, or from human to animal, to hell being, to hungry ghost, to asura to asura. So when you come to a conclusion through analytical meditation, then we have to develop the highest level of wisdom, which is the wisdom of meditation, where you reach a conclusion and then you focus. So then you stop analytical meditation and you bring to play your single-pointed concentration. So where you focus single-pointedly on that correct conclusion that you've reached, to sort of fix it in your mind so that it displaces the ignorance of that particular topic. So we have a mind that thinks that we have a belief that there's only this life. There are no previous lives because we don't remember them. And future lives is some kind of wishful thinking. That's the sort of way we're brought up, a lot of us. So we don't have this sort of innate understanding that the mind is beginningless and endless. So through analytical meditation, we come to the conclusion that it is, but that's different from what we've habitually believed. So we have to focus on it until that correct understanding displaces the wrong understanding. So this principle applies to every step on the Lam Rim. So every topic is something to be learned about, to be thought about, and to be meditated on and realized. So in order to have a realization, it's not enough just to go through this process. Just as it's, not enough to take an apple seed and, put it on the table and think it's going to grow. It has to be put in the ground, and just putting it in the ground may not be enough either. It has to be looked after. So if we want to grow a nice garden, first we have to go and dig up the soil and get all the, sticks and roots of other stuff out of it, and broken glass or whatever is there, in the garden that was neglected by the previous owner. And so that's like purifying the mind. So we have to purify the dirt in our garden, and then we have to enrich it. So you water it and you put in fertilizer and manure, whatever you use, and then when it's nice and clean and rich, then when you put the seeds in, they'll grow. So we also have to enrich our mind through creating merit. So, and purifying and creating merit are often two sides of the same coin. So, we do prostrations, we offer mandalas. So there are all these different preliminary practices we do, like Guru Yoga practice and I mentioned the Vajrasattva practice. So that's, one of the, so there are different, so there are 9 different preliminary practices that we do. They're preliminary in order to purify and enrich our mind, so that when we meditate on the Lam Rim, the understanding and experience will come very easily, especially to realize emptiness, which is sort of the ultimate thing we have to do to attain liberation, to escape from beginningless suffering of psychic existence. So I was told when I was a medical student, we would talk when we were doing oral exams, when you go in front of the examiner, so we used to have to do written exams and then oral exams where you'd be given a patient, and you have to go and see the patient and take a history and make a diagnosis. And then you go in front of the examiners and they say, what's your diagnosis? And then you say, well, I think it's, this. And then you say, and there are 6 possible causes. So we were told never say that, because you'll get to the 5th and you won't remember the 6th cause. And then the examiners will just sit there looking at you. And, the rest of the time you'll be extremely embarrassed you couldn't remember the 6th cause, and they probably won't let you off the hook and you'll fail. So, but here I am, I'm on the hook now for 9 preliminary practices. So, so there's, Vajrasattva, 100,000 Vajrasattva mantras, 100,000 refuge formulas, Namo Gurube, Namo Buddhaya Dhammaya Sangye, as we say in the Guru Puja, taking refuge, or you can do it in Tibetan, Lama Lakyab Suchiwo, Sangye Lakyab Suchiwo, Cho Lakyab Suchiwo, Gena Lakyab Suchiwo. So you have to say this 4 refuge things 100,000 times. 100,000 mandala offerings, but you do it with a physical mandala. You just do the short one, but like that. 100,000 mandala offerings, 100,000 guru yoga practice, so 100,000 migtsemas we do. We may say, well, the one we do at the very end of today we'll do, if Bob remembers, which he always does. So 100,000 migtsemas, then 100,000 water bowls, 100,000 tsatsas, these tsatsas, these little clay images that we make, 100,000 of those, 100,000 samaya vajra. Someone keeping count? 100,000 samaya vajras. Samaya vajra, Damsik Dorji, is another purification practice, particularly for purifying broken tantric vows. 100,000 jinsek, or burned offerings with Dorji Kadro. We have the black sesame seeds. You make it the shape of a scorpion, and then you have a fire and you throw it in the fire. You do 100,000 recitations of the Dorji Kadro mantra, Vajradhaka. And there's a little image of Vajradhaka, which is like this fearsome looking little deity, big mouth open, and you visualize you feeding, and you throw black sesame seeds into the fire, and that's all your negativities, your 10 non-virtuous actions, all the ones I mentioned before, the mistakes with the Guru, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, negative actions with sentient beings, broken precepts. Did I mention broken precepts? That's another thing that we purify. Broken pratimoksha vows, broken bodhisattva vows, broken tantric vows. So we purify those. So is that 8 or 9? Vajrasattva, refuge, mandalas, guru yoga, water bowls, tsatsas, samaya vajra, tsatsas, Dorji Kadra. I think it's 9.
Did you say prostration?
Oh, I didn't say prostrations. Good one.
That's the only one I know.
Good. Well, that's a very important one, and I haven't done it, so it doesn't come to mind that easily. 100,000 prostrations. So there we are. Great. Thank you. Okay, so that'll be the homework, to memorize those 9 preliminaries. So all that you have to do before you do a long, like a 3-year retreat or a 12-year retreat. But if you want a retreat to be successful, then, I'm talking about these tantric retreats where we meditate on the deity and try to do. So in the tantric practice, there are the generation stage and the completion stage. So if you want your Vajrayana retreat to be successful, then you need to do the preliminaries to really prepare your mind for it. So once, if a mind is really well prepared, then, as Rinpoche says, the realizations come like rain falling. So like that. Okay, so that's the yada yada. And now look at the 100 verses of advice. I don't think we're going to get through the 100 today. Next time, there's only one more session after this. So we looked briefly at verses 2, 3, and 4 last time. I spent a bit of time on verse 1 with the perfect human rebirth. So, verse 4 was, forget your goals for this life. Concentrate instead on lives to come. People of Tingri, that is the highest goal. So that's the highest goal because that's the border between Dharma and non-Dharma. So as I mentioned also, I think in the first session, we have this book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche called How to Practice Dharma. So that's teachings on the 8 worldly Dharmas. And that was the homework the first time. So to memorize the 8 worldly Dharmas. So those are the ways, following the 8 worldly Dharmas, doing actions just to benefit this life alone is the way we create negative karma, the way we don't practice Dharma, the way we render our perfect human rebirth meaningless by not practicing Dharma, by following the 8 worldly Dharmas and doing things just for this life. So as Padampa Sangye says, forget your goals for this life. Concentrate instead on lives to come. So concentrating on lives to come, as as we've talked before and briefly mentioned in the motivation today, it says, so look in our mind and see what is our motivation for doing this session. So, is my motivation doing it because, I agreed to do it, and normally I'd probably still be in bed, but, I was on the schedule, so I kind of had to get up and do this. Otherwise, people would criticize me and complain that, Kurukulla Center is a bad place because the teacher didn't show up, he stayed in bed. So that sort of motivation for me being here wouldn't be so good. So I try and not make it my motivation. So one level of motivation, positive. So the negative motivation is doing things just for this life. So we're allowed to do things for this life, but not just for this life. There has to be some benefit beyond this life. So there are these, then as I'm, we always say, as I'm sure you know, there are the 3 levels of positive motivation. Doing something in order to not be reborn in the lower realms. So that's positive motivation, but pretty limited, because you're trying to be born in cyclic existence, just not in the worst places of cyclic existence. So, that's like jockeying to get the best cell in the prison, it's still in prison. So it's not that good. It's better than being in the hole, but it's not being free on the outside. So the second level of motivation is to escape from cyclic existence. So as we say, to practice the 3 higher trainings: conduct, concentration, and wisdom. So as I was saying, if you want to realize emptiness, then we need an incredible purification. We need a vast amount of merit. So that's why these preliminary practices are so important. So the second level of motivation. But, you know, so Lama Yeshe used to say that, you know, the way to attain liberation is to have pure moral conduct as the foundation, and then to develop perfect concentration, single-pointed concentration. So in order to develop single-pointed concentration, you have to have pure moral conduct. And as I said before, you know, the essence of moral conduct is keeping precepts, and the essence of, and the way to keep precepts is to take as many as possible, and have them as long as possible, and keep them as purely as possible, and to purify broken precepts as soon as possible. So we have this little booklet, I don't have at hand, called Daily Purification, little booklet put together by Lama Zopa Rinpoche that you can keep in your shirt pocket, and every time you notice you've done negative action, you can pull it out and purify. So say Atisha used to, so if you look at the statue of Atisha at the center, or you look at pictures of Atisha, he always has this little stūpa beside him. And because wherever he went, he always carried the stūpa with him. And he used to say, I never break my pratimoksha vows. I rarely break my bodhisattva vows, but I break my tantric vows like rain falling. Again, here's the rain falling thing. It means it happens a lot. So whenever he noticed he'd broken one of his vows, he'd jump off his horse, because they used to go everywhere by horse, and then he'd put his stūpa on a high place, on a rock, do 3 prostrations, and immediately do the purification, not to wait even a moment, not wait till he got to where he was going to purify the broken vow, but to purify it immediately. It was so important. So that's the thing about keeping precepts purely. As soon as you notice you've broken one, we should purify it. So we have this little booklet. We can always do the 4 opponent powers and do the Vajrasattva recitation. I'm sure we have these booklets at the center, right? These little booklets. So if we can keep our moral conduct pure when we go into retreat to try and develop shine, calm abiding, you know, the 9 levels of, you see the chart with the shine chart, the shamatha chart with the monk and the elephant and the monkey, symbolizing the different ways we develop single-pointed concentration, getting rid of distractions, getting rid of sluggishness, and gradually refining our mind till we can focus on the object of meditation single-pointedly without distraction for as long as we like. So when we've accomplished that, then we're in a really good space to study the teachings and meditate on the teachings on emptiness and realize emptiness. But, you know, it takes strong renunciation of cyclic existence. So, you know, there are, again, 3 principal aspects of the path that Lama Tsongkhapa taught, you know, renunciation, bodhicitta, and right view of emptiness. So, you know, in the Theravada tradition, there's not so much emphasis on bodhicitta. Remember the Theravadan monk, Kantipalo, criticizing Lama Zopa. So this young monk talks too much about bodhicitta. So, you know, in Theravada tradition, the focus is on keeping the vows purely and developing single-pointed concentration, and then meditating on emptiness to attain liberation. And so renunciation is a very strong factor in the motivation. And then with great determination to abandon distractions and to develop single point of concentration, and then meditate on emptiness. And so then the realization that you get a glimpse of it, and then it goes away. So that's the thing with developing the wisdom of meditation. You get a flash of realization, but then it goes away because concentration isn't powerful enough. So you get another glimpse and you try and hold it, and then it goes away. And then so over and over again. So gradually your direct perception of that truth, of whatever it is, in this case emptiness, lasts longer and longer until it never goes away. And then you're free from karma and free from suffering. So if your motivation is to, I must free myself from cyclic existence, I must never suffer again. So it's, Lama used to say, when the arhats attain that realization, it is everlasting, blissful, peaceful happiness. It's a state of consciousness. So you may attain it in the body, but when you leave the body, it just falls away. And, like a butterfly leaving a cocoon or whatever it is, whatever they do, I forget. And, but it's such a relief. And you just disappear into that blissful state of consciousness for eons. So good for you, not so good for the other sentient beings, because they're still mired in samsara while you're off blissfully enjoying yourself. So in one of his teachings, Rinpoche said, equilibrium meditation, that just trying to attain your own blissful happiness is selfish and cruel. It's cruel because you're not really harming anybody, but you're not helping anybody either. And you've used other sentient beings to get there. To practice the non-virtue, to practice the virtue of not killing, you need other sentient beings not to kill. I mean, not to kill, you depend on other sentient beings who can be killed. To not steal, you depend on other sentient beings who own stuff that you can rip off. Sexual misconduct, you need a partner who you betray, and you need another sentient being to take advantage of. Lying, you depend on other sentient beings to deceive. And so gossiping, speaking harshly, slandering, these 7 non-virtues of body and speech, you depend on other sentient beings to not do them, to practice their opposite, to practice the virtue. And, so that, so we really depend on other sentient beings to free ourselves from cyclic existence. So just to get your own everlasting blissful happiness and forget those upon whom you've depended since beginningless time, like all those who gave birth to you, your parents, beginningless parents, it's considered selfish. So Lama used to say, after the arhats spend eons absorbed in this blissful state of consciousness, eventually it just wanes a little bit, and that's when the Buddhas come knocking on the arhat's mind, say, hey, wake up. You think you've achieved your goal, but still got a long way to go. from here to enlightenment, and other sentient beings are waiting. So then they have to enter the Mahayana path from the beginning and start and develop bodhicitta. So from Mahayana point of view, the only worthwhile thing is to attain enlightenment as quickly as possible. So remember the analogy of the river. There's a wide river, but it's made up of two tributaries. So you can get to the other side by crossing the narrow tributary and then relaxing on dry land for a while, but then you have to cross the other branch to get to the far side. So that takes much longer than the more difficult but faster journey of crossing the main river. So crossing the main river is like the Mahayana path, going from where we are to enlightenment, instead of going from where we are to nirvana and then relaxing there and then crossing the Mahayana branch to get to the enlightened side. So that's then the third level of motivation. The highest level of motivation, the one we try to cultivate, is, I must reach enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings, therefore I'm going to become a Buddha. So that's what this verse 4 is talking about. Concentrate instead on lives to come. So there's three kinds of lives to come. There's the life in upper realms, like human, sura, asura, but that's still within cyclic existence. Then there's the life as an arhat, outside of cyclic existence, good as far as it goes, but doesn't go far enough. And then there's the enlightened mind. So that's the one that we're always told to aim for. Then verse 5 says, families are as fleeting as a crowd on a market day. People of Tingri, don't bicker or fight. So so everybody loves their families and their children and their parents and everything, but in one way, from the Dharma point of view, they're considered a bit of a hindrance because they're such objects of attachment. And attachment is, one of the worst kinds of negative minds. It's kind of very hard to get rid of. It's like, so attachment is a mind that kind of sinks into its object, and it's difficult to extricate. It's like oil. If you spill oil on paper, it's pretty hard to get the oil out of the paper. So that's like attachment, with its objects of attachment. And attachment arises from ignorance. So, there are two levels of ignorance. There's the ignorance of conventional reality, ignorance of karma, where we don't see that that our experiences of happiness and suffering result from the principal cause of the happiness and suffering we experience. The principal cause, remember, the important cause, is inside. It's a karma that we create. So we don't see that. So, it's like watering a garden and seeing things grow and think that the cause of those things growing is the water. that we poured on the dirt without realizing there are seeds inside it. So when, we have problems with people, we blame the other person for that problem. Or, when we make plans to go on a picnic and it's cold and rainy, we sort of blame the weather. We don't see that these experiences are a result of causes that we've created, the karma we've created. Or when we experience happiness and pleasure by meeting another person or with meeting other people, we think that that experience comes because that's such a nice person, that's such an attractive person, or that person did something nice for me. Again, without seeing that we created the karma for that to happen. Without the karma, that wouldn't have happened. So that's the ignorance of a relative or conventional reality. And that comes from the ignorance of ultimate reality, the nature of our own mind. We have this strong feeling of I, this self-existent me. So, we feel it in our chest. There's a real me in there. So if we understand what we are, what a person is, what a sentient being is, there's only two components there. There's a mind and a body. They're also, up there somewhere. There are 4 kinds of sentient beings in the formless realm that don't have bodies, but most of us have bodies and a mind. So if you look at the body, is the I the body, the self that we feel? So if we dissect the body, if we analyze the body, and look for the I inside the body, can't find it. In my days of dissecting bodies, I didn't know there was such a thing as the I. So I just looked at the nerves and the muscles and the things that were in the anatomy textbook. We dissected bodies and tried to find all the things that anatomy textbooks describe. But I never inadvertently came across a self, an I, in the chest or anywhere. And if you look at the body, it's really, when you come down to it, it's just a bunch of atoms all joined together in different ways. Atoms and molecules and compounds. And even an atom, which is a small part, is just a nucleus and the electrons. And I think there are other parts now. There are neutrons and protons and stuff that I've forgotten or they didn't know about when I did physics. But and it's not really a solid permanent thing. These electrons are buzzing around, moving all the time, and there's the nucleus is just this sort of bundle of energy, and eventually it can disintegrate. So there's nothing permanent, nothing unchanging in the body. Yet the I that we feel is some unchanging thing. We've always felt me since we were born, since before we were born, actually, since beginningless time. But the I we feel in this life, we associate with this body. So if you look for it in the body, you can't find it. So that leaves the mind. Well, as I said before, the mind is just a series of thought moments. There's nothing permanent there. There's nothing that isn't changing from moment to moment. So the I, this self, this permanent I that we feel, self-existent I, it's not in the mind either. So if it's not in the mind or body or the combination of body and mind, you can only draw one conclusion, that it's a delusion, that it doesn't really exist. But we've operated under the delusion of the self since beginningless time. So then this false I, this real I that we feel, really I that we feel really exists but really doesn't. So that coupled with the sentient being's innate wish to be happy and not to suffer, that's innate in all sentient beings. You know, I want to be happy, I don't want to suffer. Leads us to think of the happiness of the I. So when we run into these experiences of happiness, people we meet, or the nice food, or music that we like. I mean, different things that we experience sense pleasure with. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. The different ways we have pleasant sensory experiences. Because we feel that experience comes from that object, we get attached to the object. So attachment arises. There's the wrong sense of self, there's innate wish to be happy, there's the experience of happiness in contact with different kinds of sense objects. We don't understand that really comes from karma. So then we get attached. So that's where attachment arises. And then when something thwarts our attachment, something interferes with our attachment, we don't get what we want, someone takes it away, the object changes into something unpleasant instead, then anger, we get angry, hatred, aversion arises. So aversion is kind of a rough mind that wants to destroy whatever it is that interferes with our attachment, with our happiness. So these are what Buddha called the three poisonous minds: the ignorance, attachment, and aversion. And that's their evolution. That, we've always had this wrong conception of the self. The self wants to be happy, so we get attached to different objects with which we experience having pleasant feelings. And then if something interferes with that, we get angry and upset and label enemies and things like that. So this happens a lot with those with whom we're closest, with attachment. And then we get angry with our members of our family and with our friends. We have this friend that we've always had, and then the friend does, friend goes off with your partner or something, and becomes an enemy. And, of course, these labels of friend, enemy, and there's also stranger. So when we do the equanimity meditation, we classify other sentient beings as friends, enemy, and strangers. So these are just temporary labels, because friends become enemies, enemies can become friends, and strangers can become one or the other. Sentient beings we've never met all of a sudden come into our life one way or another. So we're always labeling other sentient beings this or that. So if we see someone we have a friend who goes away, so don't be a stranger. Stay in touch. So families are as fleeting as a crowd on market day, because the family that we have in this life wasn't our family in previous life, won't be our family in a future life. I mean, eventually will be, eventually may be, because past is beginningless, so every possible permanent karma is there. And in the future, if we stay in cyclic existence, every permutation combination will arise again. And so, so there's, as they say, there's nothing new in cyclic existence, even though we're always looking for new experiences and think we've never had them before. It's part of the allure but again, it's a delusion. So in in the 37 practices of Togme Sangpo, some of these things we're talking about come in the first 4 verses. So he says, the practice of all bodhisattvas is to study, reflect, and meditate. So I was just talking about that before. Tirelessly, both day and night, without ever straying into idleness. In order to free oneself and others from this ocean of samsara, having gained the supreme vessel, a free, well-favored human life so difficult to find. So that's the perfect human rebirth. So we talked about what. The practice of all bodhisattvas is to leave behind one's homeland, where our attachment to family and friends overwhelms us like a torrent, while our aversion towards enemies rages inside us like a blazing fire, and delusion's darkness obscures what must be adopted and abandoned. And that's what we're talking about here. Leave behind one's homeland, where our attachment to family and friends overwhelms us like a torrent. So, I was lucky enough to do all that before I even knew this stuff. But then the third verse is, the practice of all bodhisattvas is to take to solitary places, avoiding the unwholesome so that destructive emotions gradually fade away. And in the absence of distraction, virtuous practice naturally gains strength, whilst with awareness clearly focused, we gain conviction in the teachings. So, so in terms of taking precepts, practicing pure morality, the foundation of Dharma, it's easier to do, and especially if we take lots of precepts, it's easier to keep them in solitude, to strengthen our mind, which is not necessarily a permanent situation, but to develop our Dharma practice in solitude, away from distractions, is easier. And that's partly why monasteries and nunneries exist. So where you can stay with like-minded people and away from the distraction of the lay life and family life, where we strengthen our practice so that when our mind is strong, then when we go back into those previous situations, we're not sort of sucked into them again because we've developed strength of mind. So the practice of all bodhisattvas is to take to solitary places. And then the practice of all the bodhisattvas is to renounce this life's concerns. For friends and relatives long acquainted must all go their separate ways. So, friends and relatives, they go away, they leave, they die, we die. Wealth and prized possessions, painstakingly acquired, must all be left behind. So that happens when we die, or maybe it gets left behind when we have 148 million judgment delivered against us. I'm talking Rudy. And consciousness, the guest who lodges in the body must in time depart. So that's a nice way to look at our mind too. We're just a guest in this body, the guest house of the body. And like guests, this is not Hotel California. This is a hotel that we have to leave. So that's all connected with what we've been looking at so far in these first 5 verses. And it goes on, you know, verse 6, wealth and property, like a magic show, just seduce and deceive. People of Tingri, don't let the knot of avarice bind you. So, you know, again, all these things that we work for so hard and accumulate eventually disappear. In the Dhammapada, there's this verse. You know, the Dhammapada, in the Tibetan Dhammapada, Uddannavaga, which is similar to the Pali Dhammapada. In the Uddannavaga, the Tibetan Dhammapada, that was translated by our friend Gareth Sparham, published by Wisdom. Actually, the first edition I published in Delhi when I was there in '83. There's a verse that says, you know, the end of collection is dispersal, the end of rising is falling, the end of meeting is parting, and the end of life is death. So that's what this verse is also saying. But wealth and property, like a magic show, just seduce and deceive. Whatever we accumulate and work so hard for, in the end, it's for nothing because we have to leave it. And the enjoyment of it while we have it is extremely hollow because it's not real pleasure. It's not real happiness because it doesn't last. And also in accumulating things and having them and enjoying them, we're just building our attachment. And every time attachment arises, we leave a negative imprint on our consciousness, like a poisonous seed planted in the ground. And that seed will ripen sooner or later into the experience of suffering, you know, exactly what we don't want. So we accumulate these family and friends and possessions and power and position in order to be happy. But in the process of doing that, we create negative karma, the cause of suffering. And in the end, everything turns against us. And if we die with attachment to our family and friends and possessions, you know, there's no way to be reborn in the upper realms, dying like that. You know, it's guaranteed of being born into worse suffering than we have experienced in this life and that we can ever remember, even though we've had it countless times since beginningless rebirths. Okay, well, we've done 6 out of 100, and we'll do 94 next time. Not likely. So anyway, I think that's the end of today. So sorry to raving on, but I hope some of it was useful. And so we started by generating bodhicitta for this session, you know, abandoning the negative motivation, generating the highest positive motivation. We talked about the Buddha's teachings somewhat. And now we should do the third thing, which is dedicate the merit that we've accumulated by generating bodhicitta and talking about Dharma teachings. So we should dedicate this merit, you reaffirm its intention to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. So think, you know, because of this merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So we just do a couple of concluding prayers, but that's their essence. Thanks, Bob.
Short Thanksgiving mandala offering. Ji perki jukching me tok tram, re rab ding jin yi ne gen pa de, sang ye jing du nik te u wang ye, droku mam dak jing la che pa shu. Ji tsun la me ku tse rab tin ching, nam ka trin le chok chu gi pa da, lo sam ten pedren me sa sung gi, dro we mun sel tak tu neg yu chik. Ye dam guru rat namanda lakam niryatayami. Short, long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama at the bottom left side of the page. In that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion, to the lotus in the hand, Lord Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be fulfilled. And the short, long life prayer for Lama Zopa for his swift return will change the last few words to please, please return swiftly. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please return swiftly. Prayer of dedication, bottom left side of the page. For this virtue may I swiftly, having gained Guru Buddha's state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious supreme Bodhi mind mirror, where unborn arise and where born never decline but increase forevermore. And Mig Se Ma, Mig Made Sewe to Chen Chen Rezig Dreame Kempe Wangpo Jumpel Young, Dupang Malu Jongze Sangwe Da Gang Chen Kepe Tsugian Sun Kappa, No Sandrape Jabla Sowa De. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thanks everybody. Next couple of Sundays are off. I think Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, whatever it is. And so then there'll be one more, the first Sunday of January, I think, is it the 7th or something like that?
Yeah, January 7th.
Yeah, and then Venerable Rabina will be here, and then Geshe-la will be back. So one more to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Thank you so much.
And just
Thanks,
two
Nick.
announcements. The rest of the week, we have Tara Puja that's in person on Wednesday evening and Lama Chopa on Friday evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.